welcome to Ignite 2020. I'm Vince Power. I'm a Principal Solution Architect at Red Hat, and this is a session on how to deploy Java EE apps on Arrow with JBoss EAP. Arrow is short for Azure Red Hat OpenShift. So the basic agenda, this is only a 20-minute session. It'll be pretty quick. We're just going to quickly review the pieces of this solution. And before that, we'll just do a little highlight of what Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform architecture looks like, just in case you're not aware, just to kind of set the ground for what the benefits are. Then we'll go through the deployment steps. I'll show what's involved with setting up an Arrow cluster, and then we'll go through the all the steps required to deploy an application from source code. This time it's GitHub specifically in this case, and then that'll be part of a demo. And then I've got some next steps, useful links to follow after that if you want to do more follow-up or information. And then I've got a slide showing a few more ways to deploy Java apps on Azure that's fully supported by Red Hat and Microsoft. So the idea of OpenShift Container Platform is Red Hat's Kubernetes, enterprise-grade Kubernetes distribution. Not only is it built on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is 20 years experience, being secure, stable, and supporting what enterprises need. It's got a certified Kubernetes distribution on top of it. And then where the real value of OpenShift comes in is all the extra pieces we pre-integrate in the package to be included. So there's monitoring, like Prometheus is built in, so already enabled for metrics. We've got service meshes available. We've got serverless computing. We've got runtimes, like we're going to show in this demo. We've got a bunch of dev tools and CI/CD pipelines, which kind of also get showed off in this demo. The idea is that if you want to get started with containers and cloud-native applications, and even some virtualization support now, this is everything you need out of the box to just, as a development team, just do your thing. You don't need to get into, figure out the infrastructure or figure out all the individual components that you need to get a full enterprise Kubernetes. It's just up and running from the start. So the two main pieces that we're going to involve with this demo is Azure Red Hat OpenShift, also as Arrow, which is a fully managed OpenShift cluster. And I say fully managed because there's actually a Microsoft and Red Hat's joint engineering support effort that goes into making sure it's up and running. So as a development organization, you don't need the operational experience or support. There's a team in Azure that will support it and keep it running. And it's also provisioned and built through the regular Azure stream, so you don't need any special licensing from Red Hat. You don't need to make a second deal. You can just spin it up in your Azure subscription with no help. So then the other piece we're using for this is part of our Red Hat Runtimes middleware solution. There are components and frameworks that are built to make a developer's life easy, so you don't need to figure out which tools you're using. You can just kind of go, okay, I'm using React, or I'm using Spring, or I'm using Java EE, and then just have these are pre-built containers and frameworks that are tested and certified and built on Red Hat technology, so it just works. You don't have to mess with it or figure out how to import Java 11 on top of like another Linux, like Alpine Linux or some other. It's all pre-built and worked, and you just kind of use it with your application. So when coming to creating an Arrow cluster, once you take care of your prerequisites like quotas for your subscription, making a resource group, and in the case of Arrow 4, you need to make your own VNet with 2 subnets as a minimum. And we're also including a pull secret to allow access to some extra Red Hat technology like runtimes. Pull secrets is optional. You don't need to include it. It's a fully functional cluster without it. There's other optional tags like private networking and things that enterprises need to satisfy all the security requirements, and private networking, express route, however you connect. Once the cluster is running, the deploying an application is as simple as one step. Like with the OC new app command, OC is kube control or kubectl with a bunch of OpenShift specific extra things built into it. So new app's an example where it builds an image stream and a build pipeline and a build config and does the deployment all kind of as one command to save a lot of work. So it really makes it easier for a developer to just build the app, deploy it, and then in the background it'll take care of your CI/CD pipeline and getting it up and running. But to get to that new app command for Java, you need to make a key store and create any secrets you need inside OpenShift, including for private registries, and import a couple templates in this case that we're taking advantage of for simplicity, right? Because the whole idea to show for this is to show all your existing Java EE apps. The vast majority of them you'll be able to just take the code, run with these pre-existing templates, and just be up and running. with just a few commands on top of Azure. So this is a demo. We're going to actually run through the live commands to make it work. So the first thing, and I'm going to bounce between Windows and Linux just to kind of show it works on both. So the first thing is, AZ arrow is the command line tool to do everything you need with arrow on your Azure subscription. So the first thing we're going to do is, I've got a cluster already spun up, just to save the time to do it. It's called arrow ignite, and this is the URL for the console that we're going to use. So let me go over to the web console, and it's going to ask us to log in. Obviously, Red Hat secures everything out of the box, just so you don't have to worry about it. In this case, we're going to log in as cubeadmin, but I don't know the password. I didn't build the cluster, so we're going to go and retrieve the password from Azure. So there's the kubeadmin password. That can also be used for the command line if you want to use it that way too, but we're going to use it for the web interface. So this brings you into your Red Hat OpenShift environment. It's just like every other Red Hat OpenShift cluster, except this one is managed and heavily integrated with Microsoft Azure for things like storage, and it uses it automatically deploys masters, worker nodes, that kind of thing. So we're going to do these tools from the command lines. So the easiest way to log in the command line, once you're in the web GUI, is to copy the command line config. So you click the link, brings you to display the token, which gives you your API token, but it also gives you the actual command you can run to do the login. So we're just going to switch over to Linux here. So we're going to do the login, and it tells us we've logged in, so many projects are in that environment, and it tells me which project I'm using. But in this case, we want to start with a new project. We're going to call it EAP demo, just for simplicity. So that's created the demo. So now, as we said before, we need to create a key tool, which is just a standard Java thing. I already have one built just to save the time. So the first thing we want to do is to create a secret from that key store. So this is to create a generic secret from the key store, no problem. Okay, so that's got a secret that's now created. The next thing is, because we're pulling this from Red Hat's private registry, you need to load in that's also a secret because it's got some credential information in it, which you can get by going to developer.redhat.com and registering if you don't have a license agreement already in place. So that deploys that, and because we're using that secret to pull and push images, we just need to link it for pull. So nice and simple and easy to use. Now the next step, there's not a lot of work so far. The next step is we load templates. This is just a loop that runs through all the different templates available for our version 7.3 of our EAP product. It's just easier to run it as a loop. So now we've made a new project. We've loaded the templates. We've made a couple secrets, right? And now it's time to deploy a new app. So the app has a template. It's going to use an image stream. We'll just name it after a new environment, and then it's going to pull the source code from here, from this GitHub repository. It's going to reference OpenShift as a subdirectory in there, and then the context directory is kitchen sink, so that's another directory deep. So now, based on the template, it's now made a sample application. It gives you a bunch of parameters that it's built. It's made a few more secrets, and it's those are the Maven arguments it's using. So it's made a service for the main app and a service for it, a health check, which is the ping. It's made a route, so it's externally available from the cluster, a couple image streams to do the builds, and it's successful. So this is the URL it will be available at when the build is done. which can take a few minutes, but I have one that's already built, so I'm going to show you what it looks like in progress. So if we go to projects, we go to EAP demo, which is what we're working on. You can see workloads. The EAP app is what this is deployed, and you can see it's got builds available. So if we go down into the actual build section, so we're in the proper project, it's actually running this build right now. There's 2 builds available, and when you actually go into a build, you can actually see the log and watch the actual build run, which isn't always the most interesting thing. But once it runs, you can go. Once it runs in your project, you can start to actually see it. When it runs, it'll actually time it deploys. It's got up running. So we're going to switch over to the one that's done, just because it can take 10 or 15 minutes to actually run through the build. Depending on your internet connections and where your registry is located and everything. So these are my workloads. It's got 1 of 1 pods done. It's the first iteration, so every time you do an update to your code, you can have a webhook click and operate, which will actually, automatically increment your build. So inside this, it's got, where the registry location is, any volumes that are mounted, that kind of stuff. So there's the YAML config behind everything, because this is just Kubernetes deep down with a bunch of nice tools wrapped around it, right? So that's the idea. And this shows the actual pods, shows memory usage, CPU, file system. This is the kind of stuff that is very useful to have, especially when you're testing. You don't want to worry about setting it up yourself. So in this workload, it's just, we can scale up or down the pods automatically, that kind of stuff. You can actually, you can see it's made the 2 services that are available, but we're going to actually go to the URL and see what it looks like when it's actually built. So we're going to switch this to done, because its builds are finished by now. And it should show the application up and running, which it does. So those are the only steps really involved to take an enterprise app, a Java enterprise app, and have it running containerized on Azure. It doesn't always work this simply, but when it does work, it works very well. So the next steps and useful links, since everybody, I believe, can download these slide decks, there's a link to the JBoss EAP runtimes and some developer information about how to use it, how to set up an environment if you want to play with it. We've got Microsoft Azure OpenShift documentation, like how to do the basic cluster builds, some more in-depth configuration guides. We've got some information on Red Hat OpenShift, which is what Arrow is essentially at its core, but it's more in-depth. Like, it's not specific to the Microsoft implementation. It will cover other platforms we have available. And version 4.4 is what's currently used with Arrow. We also have OpenShift Container Platform Learning Environment, learn.openshift.com. There's a bunch of catacodas to kind of get a feel for how OpenShift works and how it doesn't, just, if you want to experiment with it. And then the last is a workshop for learn to use Arrow. So if you want to deploy Arrow in your subscription and just kind of get a feel for everything and how it works, it kind of runs you through deploying a couple of apps, showing how storage works, showing you different storage classes, persistent volumes, how you integrate with Azure monitoring, and a few more advanced features. Because remember, the idea of here with Arrow is it's fully managed. You don't have to worry about keeping it running, but you do have that flexibility to configure your own monitoring and all the other system parameters you will want to use. And then finally, just because it's a Java app and not everybody's ready to jump right to containers, there's a couple other ways to do this. So in the marketplace offering, we have a JBoss offering coming up that'll run an app service. So it's still kind of containerized, but it's not the whole Kubernetes environment. So it's a good ways to play, kind of get comfortable with containers and work. We also have JBoss on virtual machines coming out, which are built on some common deployed ceremonies like clusters, single node, different variants like that. And then the Azure Marketplace offerings are all built around our quick starts, which are a bunch of templates that are stored in GitHub that are, kind of best effort support because it's the upstream open source, where Marketplace is the supported, commercial offering. So it's just kind of shows we're really open. We try to use as much open source as we can in our solutions, and in our value with our partnership with Microsoft is taking that open source technology, packaging it, making it commercially supportable and usable. So you as a developer or administrator, just from day one, you can just be up and running. So if there's any questions or any information you want, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out. We can arrange demos. We can arrange, talk with people in the field in your region, and then for support. And we have a developer site too, which is developer.redhat.com. Thank you very much.